Hey folks, John Kelly, law enforcement life coach with your Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. I've got Roland Clee with me today, and you say, Roland Clee. Yeah, I know, not a household name, at least not yet. Not only did he do some amazing work in the first chapter of his life, working with Orlando PD, the second chapter, I think, is shaping up to be just as impactful. Roland is the lead analyst at Command Staff Consulting. He worked with Orlando PD for many years. He was the guy they brought in on major projects, and he's just got some amazing things done. He was the guy behind the scenes that made that engine work. And so we're sitting down with Roland. He is doing some amazing work now. He's an amazing writer. And, you know, when you read what Roland puts on the paper, it's passion, but it's not emotion. And I think that's what we need. We're so desperately seeking. The passion comes through without the emotion rhetoric that inflates and distorts. And so we're going to talk about some issues going on in law enforcement, some things that we need to be aware of, and some steps and actions that we can take to right the ship. Right? I could just go on and on and on talking about Roland. So I'm going to shut up, and I want you to help me welcome Roland to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Roland. Oh,
appreciate it. And thank you so much. Man. You connected with me about 3 months ago, out of the blue. Yes. And I was like, hey, this guy sounds really cool. I said, let's go meet for lunch.
Yeah, right.
And I was just blown away and wanted to see you again. So I invited you to my political social club, and yes. And then by the time I got there, you know, you'd already joined. I'm like,
oh yeah, listen.
I'm like, I can't wait for these guys to get to meet my friend John, and I'm so proud of you. And you're doing great work. You're doing that. This officer wellness space is crowded with a lot of people saying the same things, and you have the best unique approach to it of anything that I've heard.
Oh, thank you.
And you know, I know that the work that you're doing will benefit so many people, and especially our young officers. And you know, I'm passionate about those guys. So
absolutely, yeah, so that's the hope, man.
I appreciate the welcome.
Yeah. That's the hope, man. No, my pleasure. I was following you. I was reading some things you were writing, and you know, like a stalker in the background in the shady alley. I started checking you. I'm like, this guy knows what the hell he's talking about. And there aren't a lot of people out there that do. A lot of people, when they get to that mic, man, they get nutty, and logic kind of goes out the window, facts go out the window, and the heartstrings start playing. And that's just, that's not good for anybody. And so somebody that can identify an issue and then propose real, no nonsense, logical, factual arguments for or against something, that's a rarity, man. And so I love your American Peace Officer newsletter, your Substack, and all your writings. And it just, I want to get into that today. But before we get into all that, because there's a lot to discuss there, give the listener just a brief history of Roland, if you will, and don't sugarcoat anything. You've been instrumental in a lot of strategic initiatives for big agencies, and you did all this at the level of a service aide.
Yes,
and that, you know, I think that dispels the misnomer that, like, well, you have to be of high rank. It's actually the higher rank you are, the less productive you are. The more constraints
sometimes
you have.
Sometimes I've seen that happen. I'm not going to say it's universal, but I've seen that happen.
So give the listener a little background, Roland.
So yeah, in 1994, I was hired as a community service officer with Orlando Police Department, and they put us through the sworn 19-week police academy. So I went there with a class full of pre-service guys, unhired guys, deputies, future deputies, and future officers. So we all kind of came up together, class of about 50 or so that was at the VOTEC at the time. They
Okay.
said when you're on your break, don't be talking to those guys over there that are in the culinary.
Oh no.
And you know, that's changed a lot. That's changed a lot for the better down there.
Sure.
But but after field training, they set me loose in uniform in a marked car, but no gun, no handcuffs. We said all the fun without a gun.
Yeah, that's a lovely. That's an awesome catchphrase.
It
Oh
was,
my
yeah.
God.
We had some fun with that. But then I got to do some training, did instructor techniques, and then did Levo training. And the best part of that was I got to be personally acquainted with every officer on the force. And we had about 600 sworn officers.
So you're
force
you're
at the
helping
time.
with the in-service training. So you see everybody.
I see everybody, and they get to know me. They get
That's
to
great.
beat on me with an asp, and they get to shoot me with simunitions, and they get to pull me over in a tempo.
Right. Yes.
They get to do the whole thing. And you know, when you bond with people when
Of course.
you're in that situation. So in 2001, I had the opportunity to they just moved the position under homicide. So
Okay.
they said, yeah, well, you go up there and run the career criminal program, and which was mainly an administrative job. It was an impossible job. But then they decided, you know, that's not enough. Let's give him this juvenile program called
See,
SHOCAP.
you always have, listen, a little, I'll give you a little probably tidbit here. You always have to walk around the office with a folder in your hand.
That's it.
It doesn't matter if there's anything in it, but if somebody sees you walking around without a folder in your hand, that's an indication that you don't have enough to do, Roland. So they gave you another hat to wear.
They gave me another hat to wear, and it was, you know, it was one of those captains that likes you, but you would have been better off if they didn't like you.
You're killing me with kindness here.
So with that, I decided that we'd put our officers in the city of Orlando. We'd send them out. I get about 20 officers. We'd check about a dozen kids each, about 250 kids, and we'd take about 25 of them to the jack every night for probation violations. We did this with Department of Juvenile Justice, and I built a pretty good track record with that. I mean, this is just one of the things that they like to talk about and say that was a success. So analyst up in Seminole County gets a $750,000 overtime grant to do these kind of sweeps for adults. So now I'm doing 3 counties.
Right.
So we're
Nice.
doing Orange County, and we're sending out 50 teams a night and pulling people down, and guns, drugs, money,
Warrant
bombs. One
sweeps,
time,
you
bombs.
name it, right?
Yeah, we had all these sweeps, and they were very effective, and they
So
did
wait
bring
a
down the
minute.
crime.
So wait a minute. Let me cut you off. So wait a minute.
Yeah.
Enforcing the law was effective?
Yes.
Holy smokes. Okay. All right. That's something we'll talk about. Okay. So all right, son of a gun. And when was this, Roland, time frame wise? What years?
So that was around 2007, 2008.
Okay.
That we started doing those things, and that was so successful that we decided to do Region 5, which stretched all the way from Volusia County down to St. Lucie County.
Okay.
So we're practically down there in Jupiter,
Yeah,
kind of your
no
old
doubt.
stomping
Right.
grounds.
Oh, my old
And
neck of the
we
woods.
got 9 counties that or I guess we had 7 counties, and then we added 2 more. We had 9 counties that we're doing these simultaneous sweeps on, and you know, thousands of people. And one of my signature moves was that whether the news was good or bad, we did crash police cars into one another. People got hurt. Things happen, you know.
You
But
gotta break a few eggs if you want to make an omelet.
That's it. And we would say, you know, this is what happened. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say before the night was out, you know, everybody, you know, I'd be waking people up that slept with their Blackberries, and they'd be like, okay, you know, Roland did 122 arrests and crashed 3 patrol cars.
Cost of doing business. Yeah.
One cop's in the urgent care. And that's how that's how the nights went. And but everyone was afraid to say, you know, that something went wrong or something was imperfect or something happened. I'll tell you, the most danger we had was just getting out of the auditorium and getting into our cars.
Yeah, really. It's
So with that, the chief was out at IACP in 2008, and she says, she got inspired. She says, I'm gonna call this lieutenant and see whether he's gonna be my crime czar. And she calls him up, and he's like, I'd never get called by the chief. And then everyone said, well, you'd probably be effective if you sent Roland with him.
yeah.
So in 2009, I wound up on chief staff, and I spent probably about the next 10 years there. And then I went back to PIO, and then actually wound up back in homicide for my last year as
Nice.
a missing persons detective. So,
And some of those, I mean, you just rattle off some of those big initiatives before we
well, I'll tell
start
you,
delving into.
the biggest initiative, or the one I'm most proud of, was It Takes Courage, that we did with our domestic violence. So I took what I knew from deploying cops to go and knock on bad guys' doors, to a door hanger campaign where we gave people the information, so that if their neighbors are getting abused, or they have a family member, they know the abuse is happening. It's just not 911 happening now, that
Right.
they had the tools to do that. And we filled up the shelters with fleeing survivors, and we saved a lot of lives. I know we saved a
Absolutely.
lot of lives, and I'm very proud of the work that we did. And that's still probably the biggest volunteer active event that we had
Right.
in the history of the city of Orlando.
Wow. And that's,
So
that's that, domestic violence is, that's a trap, man. That's a trap
oh
that
yeah,
people that can never get out of. And a lot of times it's not because they don't want to. It's just they don't. What's the next step? Where's the intervention going to come from? And it sounds like that was a great initiative to start helping people out of a horrible situation.
well, when I was working in homicide, homicides go up and homicides go down. So when homicides go down, the homicide sergeant and his squad is the first ones up there saying, hey, look at what we did. And then when homicides go up, they're like, we don't have anything to do with
Yeah,
it.
you can't play both sides, man. If you're gonna take the accolades when they go
That's
down.
it.
Yeah.
But one of their justifications is that you can't prevent homicide. And in fact, when we did the lethality studies, when we found that people were being stalked and they didn't realize how much danger they were in, and we got them to safety, we did prevent homicides, and we saw that statistically.
Yeah, well, statistically, when you say the likelihood of somebody killing you being a stranger versus a known person, it's kind of like 95%.
It is.
And then,
absolutely.
And then if you want to extrapolate the data even further, it's a blood relative or somebody that you're related to or married to. I mean,
Textbook.
homicides are not hard to solve. You look at the inner circle, and then, very rarely is it this, a scenario where the victim and perpetrator, victim and suspect don't know each other. So,
well,
of
that's
course
like
you were.
in the Casey Anthony case, it was the most unexceptional case. I mean, it was the most textbook case.
Right.
Because you had a family member who was involved in the death. You had the body was recovered within a quarter mile of the house. Everything was, unremarkable as far as those things go. But it just gathered so much national attention because people couldn't contain themselves with the lies and the Nancy Grace and the speculation.
Yeah. No, it's the quickest way to screw up a relatively clear-cut homicide investigation is to get the media involved in it and public opinion.
And we had that. I mean, we had that in droves, because we had an acre across the street, an undeveloped acre from the courthouse, was nothing but satellite trucks.
Right. And that's not going to influence anyone's decision, or no. Good God. So you have this remarkable career, one that you're very proud of, and rightly so. And then you wrap things up in 2020?
2021. Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
And so what does the second chapter start looking like for Roland Clee?
Well, I had a good friend who gave me some some consulting work to get started with in Deltona, and we're proud of the work that we got to do over there, working with city government, and we worked with their code enforcement, media relations, Parks and Rec, fire department, and but then I'd always kind of had the dream. The dream was boat, dock, pool, dog, laptop, and me just tapping away on the keys like
Sure.
Beethoven from the Peanuts playing his piano. And that was my dream scenario. And I was like, okay, well, when am I going to do this? And I tell you, I pulled the trigger on becoming a professional writer.
Can I stop you?
Sure.
Because you glossed over your consulting work. What are some things that, why would an agency bring you in, Roland, to do? What do you bring to the table with that? I know, because when we start talking about writing, we're not going back.
I hear you. So thank you for that. So I think, there's a lot of areas where government has trouble communicating with its citizens, that the government feels that they're being opposed by their citizens in certain ways, and sometimes for very good reasons. So, I think that the answer to that is to do a bunch of town hall meetings, give everybody a chance to listen, to find out, give the citizens a chance to find out more about what their government can do for them and what they shouldn't be doing for them, because there was a history of selective enforcement on certain things. And, so many of the things that we learned that we put into practice were things like, well, somebody gets a call for a lost dog or something like that, but then there's an abandoned car at the end of the street too, that the code guy drives by. What are we going to do about that? Well, citizens want that to change. The citizens want to know why they can't park in the grass. Well, it's because it'll start a fire.
Yeah.
So, you kind of run people through these things, but you've got to have a government that's open enough to make those decisions, but you got to have consultants come in, to take the arrows, for one thing. And the other thing is for them to know, what functional government looks like. Because you working with the sheriff's office, you saw things work amazing, that people wouldn't understand what went on behind the scenes to make like, let's say, a presidential escort happen.
Sure. Yeah.
The work that goes into that, you're thinking, oh, well, they're just going from the airport to City Hall. They're going from the airport to City Hall.
Yeah.
I know there's 39 traffic lights between.
Right. That's, yeah.
And I know I'm going to need 81 motorcycles to safely accomplish that. So those things, when the things happen seamlessly, no one notices. But when something happens where someone gets offended or someone feels like they were mistreated, well, that's where we can come in and
so
say,
the consultant comes in and is kind of like a conduit for communication.
That's it. Yeah. And the other thing that government agencies can do for themselves and do for their citizens is to seek accreditation. I tell you, the accreditation people, it's not a one and done. When people do the accreditation, they go through that process and they go up to those national standards. And, it is good for the citizens, because the citizens know that they are receiving the best that their city services or their county services can offer, whether it's in Parks and Rec or whether it's in fire rescue or whether it's in policing, that they are getting, that the policies are in place and things like that. And that's, what we're going to probably talk about in my writing later, is something that agencies can do to stave off the advance on home rule and federalization of certain areas. Because once you get these organizations accredited, it's very easy to go up to City Hall or to county commission headquarters and say, we need a new firehouse here, or we need a new school here. We're just, in order to maintain that standard, this is what it's going to cost.
There's standards placed that prevent the deteriorating of the city or the organization,
yes,
or the lowering of the professionalism, which would then warrant outside intervention.
Yeah, they deserve it. I mean,
Right,
you're
right,
just kind of
right.
running loose if you don't have those systems in place. So I mean, it's so valuable.
Hold yourself accountable before somebody else does.
And one of my friends who was an elected city commissioner told me this as an elected city commissioner. I wasn't in business with him or anything, but he says, you can't audit yourself.
Mm,
You
no,
can't audit yourself. You got to bring somebody in to say this is what our standards of cover are. So let's say you have a fire department. You bring in an organization and they can say, well, do you want a 3-minute response, a four
yeah,
minute response, or a 5-minute response?
right.
And just put it on them because there's a price tag attached to each one of those.
Sure, sure. All right, so you're consulting, um, you're troubleshooting, you're bridging the gap between the community and the organization,
Yeah,
and you're troubleshooting and you're making relationships better, and you're actually addressing real identified problems and
hmm,
providing the city with a pathway to resolving issues and maintaining a high standard. Is that
exactly.
fair enough?
That's very well said. Very
Okay.
well said. And also with a lot of the work that I do is with nonprofits and with cities is and sheriff's offices is with their media relations and really establish a media strategy and a style guide. So protect your brand. That wasn't
Sure.
important a few years ago. We
No,
used to be doing it, sending everything out, and now your brand is your brand. I mean,
no,
and
you
it
better have
matters.
somebody on top of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the message needs to be consistent and clear and uh, insightful. And it's no longer something that somebody in the office can send out while they're driving home at night.
No,
This is it's a major operation, or at least it
and
should be.
well, there's so many things such as like the 4th of July parade shouldn't be sneaking up on you. So we can calendar out things like that, and we know what our response is going to be in advance as much as you can take care of those things.
Sure.
So it's and the people that taught me what I know about media relations, about half of them were in government public relations, and about the other half were in broadcast news journalism. They
Okay.
were actual news journalists in print and in digital media and on television. So they really shaped my vision and understanding of this
Well,
in a
you have
wonderful way, and I'm
both,
very thankful to them.
yeah, you've got both camps.
Yeah,
Which is, um, it's got to be extremely beneficial for an agency that wants to bring you in because you can see it from both sides and know how it needs to be implemented to be the most effective. Um, that's excellent, man. Thanks for going back a little bit. So, getting up towards current day, I had mentioned in your intro your writing, and that was one of your your goals. Like, hey, boat, pool, keyboard, um,
dog.
dog, and talk to me about your writing. And then I've got some questions on some articles you've recently posted, and we talked before we officially started that there's so much information out there. I think it overwhelms us to the point where we end up picking the low hanging fruit, right? And we kind of joked about the stupid Bud Light. Listen, if I hear one more guy, I don't give a shit if you drink Bud Light, you don't like Bud Light. It doesn't matter. It's non consequential. But ridiculous amounts of time are getting spent paying attention to a non issue on both sides of the aisle, both non issue. And the
And
things
emotion. Just
and
think about the
emotion. Oh
emotional
my God,
expense.
you're canceling, and I don't give a shit. Enough, enough. The same week, right? The same week the Bud Light thing comes out, the government confirms for us that extraterrestrials exist. We have spacecraft. We've done autopsies on little green men, and everybody goes, "That's I don't want to know about that. It's the Bud Light." And you go, are you paying attention? Right. All the things that we were wondering, about extraterrestrial and other civilizations and life outside of this galaxy is real. It's not a 5-second blurb on a ticker. And I don't, for the life of me, that's life changing. That information is, I want to ask more questions. Like, you can't come to the podium, say that, and then walk away because the room has a million questions. But we just went, all right, and let's move on over here. Shiny object, everybody, shiny object over here. And that's what happens routinely.
So you're comparing galactic consequences.
Yes.
To one can. Not even a 6-pack.
The potential survival of the entire human race is not getting the attention it needs. But God damn it, if we don't do something about this Bud Light can with a trans guy on it, the world is going to end. It's just, you can't make it up. You can't make it up. And so what I love about you is, no matter what's going on in the world emotionally, it doesn't find its way to your writing. And you engage at a factual, passionate level, not at an emotional level, issues that directly impact the law enforcement profession. And you do it in such a way that it's not alarmist. It's just very matter of fact. This is what's going on. Mm-hmm. This is the legislature that's in the pipeline. These are the people likely to move forward on this. This is why, and this is why it's not going to be good for you. And so with that kind of half-ass introduction, I apologize. Talk to me about your writing.
The greatest concern that everyone should have right now is the policing exodus.
Okay.
And the lack of engagement of Generation Z. Because I think that the key thing that we need to do is to say Generation Z is going to take policing, if we let them, where policing needs to go. And no one else is saying that, but I'm going to say that. And am I annoyed? Am I annoyed with Gen Z when they say that they're obsessed about a coffee drink? That they're addicted? Yes. Mm-hmm. But there's no plan B. They are our future. And what we have done so far in policing is policing's been beaten down to the degree that it's not an attractive profession. And you could say, well, I would like to have more women. I would like to have more of this ethnic group or that ethnic group. But you have to have them want that.
John
Yes,
Kelly
sir.
Question. So can I draw the analogy to the Catholic Church? I'm at church Saturday, 4:00 mass with my in-laws, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm young. I'm one of the young guys in the room. I'm 56. I'm the young guy in the room. And I went, where is this organization going? What is it going to look like in 10 years? Can we draw some parallels and similarities to the law enforcement profession?
Well, you're even including the parishioners in that.
Oh, well, yeah, never mind.
I'm talking about the
running the show.
The people running the show. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have the parishioners in the pews, you're not going to have the priesthood in operation, and the deacons and all the other people that support the thing. I hadn't been to a Catholic mass in some time, and I went to the mass for the St. John's deputy.
Yes.
And it'd been, it just been a while since I had been in a Catholic church, and it was beautiful and it was amazing. And I was surrounded by Catholics. I brought a carload of Catholics.
You're all right. Nobody touched you inappropriately, did they?
No.
All right, good.
And I was like, just keep me from embarrassing myself, guys.
Yeah. What do I do now?
But the sanctuary was breathtaking. I mean, just overwhelmingly beautiful, and the music and the sound, it was just fantastic. And it's a shame what you're saying is that we have this facility that is for this purpose. And, who the people in there are singing the song called "Whom Shall I Send?"
You better start picking some people.
Like, so yeah, I mean, I think that there's a legitimate concern there too.
Right.
But
But let's talk more about the policing, because that's why we're
hold on,
here.
but before we move on, you and I live in an area where it's frequently the case that we're the youngest people in the room.
Yes, I think that's by design too, because
Yes.
there's something to be
So
said for being the youngest guy at the pool.
before I moved here, or when I was moving here, I went to the hardware store to get a garbage pail for the house, and then they had a car show on Wednesday afternoon. And I remember 30 years ago, I was the youngest person at the car show. It was like I was the youngest person at this
Yeah.
show.
Deja vu. The hell's going
So,
on here? Yeah.
but as far as my writing, there's a mass exodus of police officers, and this should be the greatest concern
Was this
that we
foreseeable,
have.
Roland? Was this foreseeable?
I couldn't foresee it.
Okay.
I saw in 2020, 2019 that 95% either didn't recommend or strongly didn't recommend their family members become law enforcement officers, and that was our key recruiting pool. So there are three types of people that that go through the academy and that succeed or somewhat succeed, and I'm part of that middle category. There were these naturals. I mean, these guys they smelled trouble a mile away, and they stopped that. And so I at least was smart enough to stick by those guys. I'm like one of those people. I'm trainable. I'll figure it out, and hopefully angels won't protect me until then.
That'll work. That works.
But then there's another third group there. And thankfully, they're a lot smaller, and the only reason they're still alive is that their families are praying for them.
Yeah, right.
And that's that grandma praying for them is the only reason. And so we have taken out that first group, and that is my concern. There's a training tactic that talks about you can draw your gun with the person with a knife that's 21 feet away, and you're still going to get stabbed.
Sure.
And so what we did was, for years, we incorporated that training into, like this 21-foot rule, so on and so forth. But now we have people who don't have any police instincts dealing with the mentally ill, screaming at them with the hand on their gun.
Yeah.
And all I see is a recipe for disaster.
Sure.
And I'm just very, very concerned about that for law enforcement professionalism in the future.
So the we're not getting the volume of the interest that we used to. Engaging Gen Z is the key, you think?
That's the absolute key. Yeah.
Okay.
And we've got to figure out what they want and give it to them, and otherwise they're going to leave.
And you're not talking about a monetary. You're talking about at the core, like meeting their why, if I may say.
I care about money a whole lot more than they do.
Right.
And for them, a lot of it is about the experience.
Sure.
And, all the people that are demanding that the police get more training don't understand that to take a police officer into training takes a police officer off the road.
Sure.
And, every place that I have worked or served or participated in, I've worked directly with 73 different law enforcement agencies during my career.
Yes.
And none of them have a system where you don't have to replace that person on post when
you can't. You can't. The city of Orlando can't go uncovered because we've got training.
Minimum manning, if you had a 10-person squad, minimum manning would be 7 or 8. And you'd have to cover that. And now you have this person wants to go to a 2-week DUI school or something like that. Well, sorry for you. You
Yeah.
can't do that. But you know, the advent of these regional training centers where we're able to give these officers the training that they want within their shift is going to be key to retaining them,
Okay.
because they are going to first of all, everyone's demanding, you know, if there's a protest march, they're like, we have poorly trained police officers. Well, no, we don't, but
Right.
you know, when we need to give them additional training that everybody agrees that we want them to have, no one, you know, we just don't have enough cops on the road to let one go. And I feel sorry because I know a few Gen Z cops that are kind of in that situation right now, but I saw that beforehand. And you know, we need to get into what makes them tick. We're dealing with a generation that has never not been able to order pizza on an iPhone.
Sure.
And now we're telling them that they have to go through 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps to see whether someone's driver's license is suspended, or to look. Oh, you can only look them up on David from this device in your car, and
Right.
things like
Right.
that.
Right.
Or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, or you have to print this out and then you have to scan it, and they're like, why do I have to print it out and scan it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, all it's doing is frustrating everybody. They're like, oh, you know, they're so hard to work with. No, they're asking some pretty reasonable questions, and that when we need to be responsive to them, especially when we're talking about records management systems. We make our records management systems so hard to use. When my wife was able to order a set of tires for my car from
Yeah.
her phone by the time we got to the next stoplight.
Yeah.
And she picked out the right tires and set the appointment, and she got me road hazard too.
Right. It's just, yeah, this should be a better way, but I guess we've got two, several different generations dividing the end user and the people making the decision on
Right.
what's going to be used. And there's a disconnect there, I guess, at some
Well,
level.
there needs to be that investment, and I think that, you know, the more we sound the not the alarm, but make known the need,
Hmm.
that police budgets are going to have to increase in order to be able to retain the staff. And it doesn't necessarily need, right now the budgets are filled with funds for unhired officers.
Yeah.
So, you know, if your minimum, if your staffing is 500, and you've only got 400 cops, you know, you're still budgeted for 500. So,
It's,
and then they can't touch that money.
no, a friend of mine, Tom Rizzo, you might be connected to him
I
on
am.
LinkedIn. He speaks on leadership, and I don't. I think I'm safe in paraphrasing and saying that one of his main beliefs is the culture that we have created is also is fairly responsible for the lack of people wanting to come into this profession. It's it's not a very supportive, healthy environment. And when people are given options, like why would I want to join your organization? We're throwing in, signing bonuses at people. We're giving them ridiculous amounts of
Mhm.
money to come, come join our team. And I don't know how well that's working either. Um, and so it's I think it's definitely there's a culture element to
Well, I think
the recruiting process.
both you and Thomas Rizzo are absolutely correct.
Yeah.
That is that legacy of, we've always done it this way, we're always going to do it this way. And you know, if Gen Z pipes up and complains and they say, hey, why don't we have this option over here to do it this way, and to do it better, I think that they're kind of pushed away and told, hey, you know, it's not your place. And then, you know, and they don't mind, because they're like, I was having fun on my phone anyway.
Yeah. Right.
I don't need that. You know, we've always done it this way. So, you know, when I was in homicide, we had some Vietnam era vets that were still, they were the senior detectives,
Sure.
but they would call in a bureau chief secretary in the middle of the night to type a warrant. And I watched as things changed for them, that, these people are sitting outside of a lieutenant's office. They're budgeted, they're in position control, they're there. But inside that office, you have a lieutenant who's never known a world without a computer and says, it's going to take me 1/3 of the time to just type this myself.
Right,
And he's
right.
doing it. And so, we still kind of have a little bit of that culture in there, is that, yeah, there was a time when these things were good, but maybe we need to re-examine those things and make them better. And
So I'm going to
go
put
ahead.
you on the spot. You're before we talk about our federal friends, um, your solution in you're king, and in Roland's world, you've identified the problem of recruitment and retention and connecting with Gen Z. So how do we solve that problem? What do we do?
The message needs to come directly from the top.
Okay.
The message needs to come from our chiefs and our leaders, and saying that we are going to be responsive. We are going to listen to these folks, that these folks have an equal voice to the people that have always done it this way. And we need to design our systems, literally our systems, around those things. Every police motorcycle, every police cruiser that you or I have ever, encountered or driven or been part of, has always been a compromise. There's never been a purpose-built police car. I mean, you may count like the 440 Chryslers from the
Oh,
early 70s
that
out in
Dodge Diplomat
California.
I had was pretty you couldn't go through an intersection quickly, making a turn or something with the carburetor, it would stall.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had those. We had Chevy Novas with and then they did the exact same thing years and years ago. But why can't we as organizations have a purpose-built um, records keeping process, computer aided dispatch process, all these processes that will streamline? You throw somebody in the back of your car, you type in their name, and you drop them off at the jail, and you're done. Instead, we've turned, so many of these things into things like, this is going to take half the day. And I understand why at these times, and I've seen the sabotage by suspects too, saying, yeah, I'm going to keep you busy all day long.
Yeah, that happens as
Now
well.
I'm crazy. Now I'm going to
That
kill myself.
Yeah, and the next
But
thing you know, your
but
day's
what
shot.
but again, what do we do about that? And I say that we need to follow the example of the fire service. Every building, every commercial building you go up to has a sign that describes the roof structure. They don't let you build a new commercial building without, a firewall, without the wires all being a conduit, without sprinkler systems. They have nearly coded themselves out of business in the fire business. In the early 70s, the fire service did not want to touch patients at all. They're like, that's you guys. And now, they've done such a good job.
They don't fight fires anymore
They don't
for the
have
most
to.
part, right? For the
Right.
most part.
They don't have to. And I think we need to follow that example, is that they've led us down this road of saying, if you get these other things right out here and around here, then you're going to be able to make things better for everybody.
I think
But that's very tactical.
That's like that in a lot of different areas. The fire service leads not only in setting those standards and putting those processes in place, but even like in my world, the wellness space, um, they were ahead of us with those initiatives, substantially. And, we often refer and defer back to, whatever, what's the model? Like, what have they figured out so we can adopt it?
Mhm.
Um, No, that makes sense. Speaking about your writing, I love it, like I said, and there are some things going on in this space, Roland, that I think most of us uh, in the law enforcement profession are fairly oblivious to. What is amongst the other issues that you've spoken about? You've mentioned retaining and recruitment being and connecting with Gen Z as being major issues. There's another on the horizon issue that's kind of just very quietly making its way across the country. And it's I liken it to a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, well said.
You speak to this.
So
Travis Yates speaks to this, and there are a few of you out there, not many, who have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. Explain to the reader, the listener, your concerns with the federal assumption of law enforcement across the country. Is that, I just coined my own little phrase here. Did that even make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it demonstrates that you read and understood what I wrote.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm so thankful for you, and you've been just a wonderful support. But I am incredibly concerned about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and I'm concerned about the benefits that the Democratic caucus says that it's going to bring for us.
Well, just so we're clear, because
yeah,
the gene pool doesn't run too deep here on the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. So when we talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, we're not talking, listen, if we want to do a deep dive on the George Floyd incident, factually speaking, it wasn't a knee on the neck. It was horrible. It wasn't good police work. The optics were horrible, but the amount of fentanyl in George Floyd's body was 7 times more that was needed to kill somebody.
So he had 11 nanograms per milliliter, and fatal is 3.
Okay, so
that's terrible, because people with 3, they're not here tomorrow.
No,
it's so sad.
Right.
But he had carfentanil in his system. He had some meth in his system. He had some weed in his system, and that was
he
George
was going to
Floyd.
die. He was going to die that day, whether somebody had his knee on his neck or not.
I'm afraid he was. Yeah.
Right.
I'm afraid that was the truth. And I know that this is very unpopular to say, but based on my experience, when I looked at that, I said that they're trying to stop him from hurting himself, and they're waiting for an ambulance.
Right. The optics were not, and then
an ambulance showed up, the
Yeah.
magic ambulance.
Yeah.
So he had been hurting himself in the cage car.
Right.
Because people asked him about that. They said, why don't you put him in the car? This is what bystander says this on the Facebook video. And they said, we tried that for 5 minutes.
Yeah. He starts hurting himself in the car.
And he was hurting himself in the car. So, but there's an excellent book on this. I'll tell you, the biggest tragedy of the George Floyd story is that the information about the encounter and about his death is so accessible to everyone.
We don't want the truth. We don't give us the truth, and don't give us facts.
It is completely ignored.
Right.
And people, if you said that, somebody was talking about, the first 30 seconds of the encounter, and they're like, and then they're talking about Chauvin, and they're talking about this, and I'm like, Chauvin wasn't there yet. This is 10 minutes before Chauvin showed up on the
Right.
scene. They're like, "Hey, you should have said nicer things to this guy." And I'm like, he wasn't even there. I mean,
Right.
let's get to the
Listen,
facts.
anytime anyone dies, it's tragic. But if you ingest a bunch of fentanyl of your own volition, don't be surprised when you die.
Yeah, it had an enlarged heart, due to the drug abuse too. And so
So
I
anyway,
wish.
the public outcry, everybody got it wrong. Tragic nonetheless, but we're going to show law enforcement.
Right. And just before we get off of George Floyd, the book "They're Lying" by Liz Collins, Collin, is should be required reading for every cop. But if you have somebody in the academy, buy it for them on Amazon, send it to their Kindle, or do something like that. But that's
Okay, excellent.
it's a purely factual thing, and it's an insider's view because her husband was the president of the union.
Okay, excellent book recommendation.
So
So we've got the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Sounds
But-
sounds helpful.
it does sound helpful, doesn't it? It's the police reform bill that we've all been waiting for.
Right.
But statistically, police don't need reform. I mean, if we were just looking at the numbers of arrests and things like that,
There you go
the
again
only-
with statistics and facts. So what do we got? About 800,000 law enforcement professionals in this country. And
and 100,000 of them are feds,
okay,
and they have been placed under they've already been put under the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act by executive order.
Okay.
From President Biden. He's
no,
already
what does that
signed
mean now that they're placed under that act?
So, but the impact of that mainly impacts local jurisdictions, including sheriff's offices and tribal police and major police departments. So it doesn't affect them greatly.
Well, because feds aren't doing the day-to-day citizen encounters that
They're not going to the
local
fight at
and
the
state
school
and
or the
sheriffs are
bar.
doing. Yeah.
They're not stopping the drunk. They're
No.
working on their projects. And but for the most part, it's going to have very, very limited and minimal effect. But what the act does do is it literally puts local police departments under federal standards and almost under federal jurisdiction.
So dive into that for me, if you will.
So, as far as organizations having their own unique policies and procedures and being responsive to their local communities, they are going to be under one standard, and it's going to be a federal standard that is devised by teams from the professional policing organizations, but they're going to be universal. And then whenever you have a carrot, you have a stick. So the stick is going to be for any organization that fails to meet those standards, and those standards are going to be far more restrictive than what we have. And what you were discussing previously is that we're taking all of these less than lethal options off the table for cops.
Is that something that's woven into the Justice and Policing Act?
It's woven into that one. It prohibits chokeholds, but it includes the ones that just use carotid pressure, like LVNR and things like that. And they're talking about anything that blocks the airway. And I have a big question. My big question is, what police agency has it in policy that says, hey, blocking someone's airway is going to be a good idea in a use of force situation? I mean, I could see it in life and death struggle.
Well, then that's a deadly force. That's a deadly force application then.
Right. But I mean, it's not codified into policy anywhere. So what is this law doing? This law is just taking more and more options off the table for law enforcement. What if they say, well, you can only tase somebody twice. After you do that, now it's deadly force. I'm like, well, that's arbitrary, but a lot of these things are arbitrary.
What about the deploying of OC spray? Eventually that does affect one's breathing.
Right.
Makes it difficult to breathe. It's not pleasant.
It does. I mean,
And
we're
if
gonna take
somebody,
off all the soft
yeah,
controls, and now we have to escalate to harder controls. But the bad guys are getting to know that. It's like the places that advertise that they have a zero pursuit policy. They have a lot
right,
of fleeing cars. You know,
right.
if you so the incentives are all over the place in a bad way on this. One of the worst things that the act does is it empowers citizens review boards to be completely independent of the police department, independent of their funding, and have the ability to create uh, to create um, investigations, to
Don't they have
initiate
subpoena power?
investigations,
Subpoena
and they're
power?
going to have subpoena power, and they're going to have the right to change the policies of a law enforcement agency from within the agency without the agency having any say in it. And this is spelled out in the thing. This isn't like, oh well, you know, I'm looking at that and then I had, you know, a great conclusion on
We're
that.
going to convene a panel and we're going to discuss some ideas. No,
But we're going to have the people who are least qualified to
right.
make police decisions.
Make
because
emotional decisions.
absolutely, yes. And
That's a huge problem. It's a
so
huge problem.
the law also empowers federal prosecutors to prosecute excessive force.
Now,
So what is
when I read
excessive
that,
force? Yeah.
when I read that, Roland, I see, I don't know, unless you've been through it, you don't know what happens. Stacy Kuhn was a subject of this in LA with Rodney King.
Mhm.
Presumed Guilty was his book. He was cleared at the state level.
Right.
Not guilty. Reasonable. Right? Graham versus Connor applied. No, this guy, was it pretty? Did it look good? No.
No.
Most use of force incidents do not look good. Every time I deployed my dog on a bad guy, it looked horrible,
Yes.
horrific, necessary,
Right.
but the optics were not good. At the end of the day, you are found innocent at the state level. And you know what they do? When the emotional crowd cries for your blood, they bring it federal, and
They
you are
throw it to
now
they throw you to the
prosecuted
feds.
for a civil rights file. Same fact pattern, same situation. You are
Yeah.
found not guilty. Double jeopardy. This is the sneaky pricks. Double jeopardy doesn't apply because it's the feds charging you now.
Well, we had to take it away from a Simi Valley jury in order to get justice. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, I remember the whole situation with that. And but we're about to see that on steroids. We're about to see
On
that just on amphetamine. You know?
and so, you know, I don't let that settle with the listener. The federal government is making your use of force case their business. And if and their perspective is, if the state doesn't get it right, and by right, they mean finding you guilty, then don't worry, citizen. We're going to prosecute under a civil rights violation charge. And in the federal court system, you can guaranteed you're going to get your justice.
And they're going to be doing it in separate courts. So it's going to be separate prosecutors, separate courts, according to the act.
I didn't know that
And
there was a problem with excessive use of force in law enforcement. With the amount of citizen encounters on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in the millions, statistically, we're looking at 0.0034% of encounters involve any kind of use of force.
yeah, what example of excessive use of force can we use that's just enough of a ridiculous example? It's Smokey and the Bandit. Buford T. Justice kicking that guy in the butt when he's not doing anything. He's like, that's an attention getter.
Yeah.
That was excessive use of force. But we have untrained eyes, and one of the threads in my writing is that the person who's looking at surveillance video or body camera video believes that we are in a 1-to-1 fight with the suspect, that this is a boxing ring, the bell has rung, everybody's gone to the center, and may the best man win, when the opposite is completely true. The bad guy is trying to be a bad guy, and the good guy, he has one job, and no one's going to let him off from that one job.
Doesn't
That
get to
one job,
walk away from it.
he doesn't get to say, okay, you win.
No.
No, it's not win lose. It's you're under arrest.
Well,
and
I
you-
always it was always bought. Well, why did he have to? Well, you either want us enforcing the law or you don't.
yeah,
And when we have to, when people don't comply, when subjects don't comply with lawful commands, we don't have the option of getting in our car and driving away and pretending that that didn't happen.
so I was with some TAC officers, and we had a guy. He was wearing 4 layers of clothing, and there was a gun somewhere in there. So he went to the ground, and the driver of the car is just standing there. You know, he's not handcuffed or anything like that. He's like, "You didn't need to do that." Yeah, we did. We have to cut that knife. We have to cut that gun out of
Yeah.
his clothes so it doesn't go off and shoot him by accident, because we don't know what type of Astra 25 that he's got, you know, in there with the 22 round in it.
Right.
And you know, it is about perception, and you know, it does not look pretty, but the idea, and the idea that's been perpetuated for too long, is that, well, the officer didn't have to do that. And to the untrained eye, you're absolutely right. It just looks like a brawl. You know, it looks like you know, Matt Arnett's there making an arrest on Gunsmoke or something like that, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work. But we don't let our officers do that. And you know, I think we've done a bad job of PR on letting people know that also.
I think that that's a huge component of it, is because, you know, echoing some of the things that you've said in the past and that our friend Travis Yates has said in the past, it takes courageous leadership to stand up and go, these were the facts, and this is why our officer did what he had to do. And, you know, and it's going to be investigated like everything else is. But I think we need to get back to a presumption of innocence.
Well, we abandoned that in May of 2020, and it hasn't come back yet. And you have seen some cops who are courageous leaderships. There's a courageous leader who's leading the Atlanta Police Department right now, and he's saying, you know, we're going to arrest these domestic terrorists who are trying to stop us from building our training center.
Sure.
And we're going to do it, and I'm going to stand up for my cops. You have to come through this badge to get to their badges.
Yeah.
And I love seeing
Right.
gutsy cops do that.
Thank
But
you.
there's no due process. There's no, and I still have, I just ran into it in the garage, but I printed something out from Major Cities Chiefs on the day after the George Floyd incident, talking about how, you know, this, I would have fired this guy on the spot, et cetera, et cetera. Well, some of the people who said that actually legally couldn't,
Right.
based on the union thing. And we heard a lot of voices. I know I'm way off topic, but just
No, it's fine.
give me a couple more feet of leash here.
Don't worry. No,
But
it's just,
they're talking about the police unions having all of this power, and what the cities and the counties and the municipalities and the governments would do is they would cry poor mouth. They would say, oh, we're only going to be able to give you guys 1.5%. And they're like, and binding arbitration? And they'd be like, yes, and binding arbitration, 1.5% binding arbitration, instead of giving the cops the 2.5% that they wanted and that they deserved. And these were all concessions that were made. The cities were manipulating the unions. The unions were manipulating the cities. And so many of those just instantly went away.
Mm.
And I want to know where those officers' back pay is for
Yeah.
them losing those protections with the stroke of a pen.
right.
In so many states. Like in Colorado, they basically got rid of qualified immunity.
Problematic. Problematic
Uh,
on many levels. So when we talk, and this legislation, it's made it 2 attempts, right? It's made it this
it's passed the
George
House
Floyd.
twice.
It's passed the House twice, and
Yes,
it's gotten hung up in the Senate.
it's gotten hung up in the Senate. Yes,
So it's out
and
there.
it's out there, and every time there's any type of high profile police incident, our president comes out and says, Congress, if you put this on my desk, I will sign it.
Mm.
I urge you to pass this act. Tyree Nichols' mom was surrounded by Al Sharpton and Ben Crump and
All the
she's
race
screaming,
baiters.
yeah, the hustlers, and she's saying if Congress doesn't pass this, blood is on their hands.
Right.
But
And
this law does not do this. This law does not make it safer for citizens, for sure. It
right.
does not make it safer for cops, and it may end, the local policing as you know it. My father told me that the reason they had these stickers in the '60s, back when people had chrome bumpers and they'd put these stickers on their chrome bumpers and it would say, "Support your local police." The emphasis was on local.
Right.
There was a huge concern at that day and age.
And when we look at polling, and we were at a political event last month before last, and one of the speakers was mentioning, the importance of local government,
Of home rule, yes.
of home rule, and that people trust their local government because the local government is supposed to be responsive to the people's of that locale's needs. And it differs all around the country. And the fear of having this federal oversight, that we're going to lose that just from a purely citizen standpoint.
And in another article, I told how the states were actually doing this to some of their cities also. Gavin Newsom's mobilized the Cal Guard, the California National Guard, and CHP into the Tenderloin to work on and he's a former mayor of San Francisco. So I'm wondering whether this bears weight on the future of the city of San Francisco Police Department. Greg Abbott, got, first of all, Austin, Texas defunded their cops to the tune of $1 billion. Then they were forced to give it back to the cops. And then they said, oh, well, a lot of cops just had it and left. They're like, I don't need to get killed here.
Yeah.
I have enough time. But we have cops. We don't have cops retiring. We have cops resigning. And then in Jackson, Mississippi, they expanded the authority of the Capitol Police to almost the whole city. So Jackson Police Department, they're down 100, 118 officers or something like that. So is that going to become, and every crime that gets prosecuted there gets prosecuted in a separate court, doesn't get prosecuted in local court.
State.
So we're seeing this erosion all over the place. The Paterson, New Jersey Police Department was taken over because
with that consent decree, no?
Not with the consent decree. It was taken over by the New Jersey Attorney General, and it was just after they had shot a barricaded gunman who came running out of his apartment bathroom with a knife. He had set a fire, broken a toilet, attacked the cops with a porcelain lid, and after hours of negotiation, he shot this one guy who himself was a crisis interventionist.
Can't make it up.
And his crisis interventionist friend said, "Hey, if the cops had let us talk to him, everything would have been fine by now."
Yeah, can't make it up.
But we're seeing more and more of the erosion of home rule in these different cases. And home rule is something, if you have it and you lose it, it takes a couple generations to get it back, if you get it back at all. And that's the real concern, and that's the worst thing for citizens. Now, a good example for our listeners of home rule was when you and I were in the police academy a few years ago,
Mm.
that statute 812 was theft. And one of the things that was felony theft was 1,000 pieces of citrus fruit. Well, that is a great example of, where local legislative priorities are
Sure.
on New York State does not have law on
Nor
the books.
Maine does not have that. No,
Maine, Massachusetts, and none of
not concerned. Right.
but local rule addresses local concerns, and we
Yeah.
need to do everything we can to strengthen that.
Mm. Roland, when we look at this kind of this movement of federalizing and nationalizing a police force, other than the things that we spoke about, why should our listeners care?
Well, I've been asking people about FBI successes, and I haven't had them been able to, man on the street, name me one of them. And I entered the police academy with stars in my eyes about the FBI, and the FBI does a great job in West Virginia of keeping track of criminal records and fingerprints and things like that. And they have their great crime lab, and they do some great training in Quantico, but they don't have a litany of success stories. And I know some of their true success stories since 9/11 are untold, of things that they thwarted and things that they disrupted and destroyed. But as far as a organization, why would we want to have them held up as the standard for law enforcement when all that people would be able to talk to me about is John DeLorean and Abscam and some of the events that are currently happening in the country today that are big black eyes on the FBI.
Sure.
So we don't have a Department of Justice, we don't have an FBI, we don't have a national police force that is apolitical. We have a very politicized, and right now it is being run by feelings instead of facts. And I think that facts need to be the engine of the train, and feelings need to be the caboose.
That makes perfect sense. And then until you have that, everything is subject to being questioned, and what the validity of any actions. There's an agenda when those organizations act, in a political, emotional nature.
Yeah, James Comey, he did the remarkable feat of making absolutely everyone mad at him just before the 2016 election. And I've heard him speak, and he's impressive speaker, impressive guy. But the decisions that were coming out of Eric Holder's AG's office and the Department of Justice have been nothing reassuring has happened.
No. Hey, before we wrap up, so you publish, is it weekly, Roland?
Well, it should be 2 times a week, but
Okay.
sometimes, if I'm not ready, I just don't do it.
Good.
I'm weighing quality over quantity,
Right.
and instead of single-mindedly focused on increasing subscribers, if I have 2 good articles, you get 2 good articles, but at least weekly. Yes.
Okay. And so if I want to subscribe, if I want to get alerted when you've published a new article, where do I go? What do I do? Please make it simple for me.
So just go to peaceofficer.substack.com, and my article will come up. Also, right now you can just Google my name and say, "Hey, where's Roland Clee on Substack?"
You
And
are a big shot. Just
I'm gonna
Google
pop right up.
Roland's name.
Kind of a
It's
big
that
deal.
easy. That easy. So Google your name, Roland Clee. I'll put that link in the show notes for your
Thank you.
Substack so the listeners can follow that as well. What's on the horizon, man? I know you're busy. I know you've got some mentoring going on. You've got some a lot of writing going on, but what's on the horizon for Roland?
Well, I want to go on the road with you a little bit too. So
There you
keep
go.
me posted on that, because I'll clear my calendar for a road trip with you any day of the week.
Sounds like a plan.
But yeah, I of course, we're very concerned about the 2024 election, and I'm talking about even just local concerns here in Northeast Florida.
Mhm.
So we really I live in the fastest growing county and the fastest growing state in the country. So the legislative priorities can't take a 2-year break here, because we need to make sure that if there is growth, that growth benefits everybody. So I'm going to be supporting that, and especially supporting the preservation of agricultural land, because if it gets developed, it's not coming back
No.
to agricultural land. And the area that I live in is a breadbasket for the country. So if any of your listeners are eating a potato chip, it probably came from the fields not far from my house. So I'd like to see that preserved. But the main thing is I really want to develop a subscriber base of young officers for the Substack, for the American Peace Officer newsletter, because I really want them to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong. I'm not going to be the back in the old days guy, and everyone screwed everything up,
Yeah.
and everything would be better. My message is the opposite of that, is that Generation Z is the most valuable resource that law enforcement has, and we need to start paying attention to that, and letting them direct the improvements to the profession, to restoring the profession to where it was. Because otherwise, who's going to be a lieutenant if they don't stay more than 3 years?
No.
Right? I mean, who are going to be our
Problematic.
future chiefs and future captains and things like that? So very, very concerning right now is to get a handle on doing true recruitment. You spoke about Travis Yates, and he speaks very wisely about how we're not recruiting, we're marketing. So I think that if people were to listen to his message a little bit, that we'd start seeing more and more people joining the ranks of policing and policing for the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, Roland Clee. Man, it's been great chatting with you. I always take away something. Thanks so much for your time today, Roland.
My pleasure. Really appreciate you, my friend.
We'll see you soon.